All right, guys. Yeah, thanks again for everyone attending. If you've not seen me before, my name's Connor Spencer. Today we'll be covering a step-by-step guide to creating customized legal documents. And if you don't already know, at Lawpath we are every bit a software and tech company as much as we are a legal and accounting practice, and we certainly have the awards to show for it. If you do check out any of our accolades. We've won awards for like best legal tech in Australia, which is no small thing. And what we've basically built is the ability for Australian business owners to get professionally drafted documents. I always say to people, these are 99% complete, and obviously you can fully customize and complete them yourself within 5 to 15 minutes. We've got some very intuitive software tools, which Edwin will touch on a bit today, to kind of help with the creation and finalization of your documents so you can send them out to your clients, suppliers, and customers. But overall, the purpose of today is to obviously introduce to you how that works. And within the presentation, if you do have any questions for us to answer about, creating the legal documents, please drop them in that Q&A chat box. But we'll cover a bit about Lawpath, who we are, how we can directly assist, and then I'll introduce Edwin, who will be discussing today's topics. But Edwin will be discussing how to access the right information for your documents, how to use the doc builder, how to meet the formal requirements of your documents, and then he'll touch on the Lawpath AI features as well. And then finally, as I mentioned, we will have that Q&A at the end. There is a separate Q&A chat bot for you guys to put in your questions, but we'll check the chat as well in case anyone drops them in there. As we will also be looking for some ideas for documents and improvements there as well. And actually, if you guys have a question that's maybe not covered within today's topic, if we do have time for it, feel free to mention it in the Q&A chat, or if you would actually like anyone to actually run through the platform with you and actually show you live, or even like just send you a video of actually using some of the tools in the document creation. Oh, good. I'll quickly answer that for you. And yes, there will be a recording of this. It will go on our YouTube page. We tend to share that via email or also through the text messages as well with the slides. So no worries if you do drop out. Awesome. So if you are discovering us for the first time, like I think Judah said, you are a subscriber, but for those who are discovering us for the first time, we at Lawpath, we are an Australian-based online digital legal platform. We reside in Sydney, but we do have clients all across the entire country. And within that time frame, with the last 10 years, I should say, we've assisted nearly 500,000 small to medium businesses in different capacities, whether that's through a company registration. We talk to a lot of people from their day zero, so they want their company registered at a fraction of cost of what the accountant would charge. And then we also provide your legally required company documents, as well as providing with the documents you need for best business practice. And all doing that while also offering affordable legal and accounting and tax aid for your business. So we are very much tailor-made for startups. And we run largely on a subscription-based model, which has saved the individual business owner, thousands of dollars in what they would typically spend in legal and accounting fees. But with a small business, we've actually saved over $100 million in legal fees within the 10 years of operation. And so actually, if you do have questions a bit more about Lawpath and what we do, please feel free to ask that in the general chat. But you can also pay us a visit to our website, to our LinkedIn, to our YouTube page. I'll share a few of our testimonials and FAQs in the chat box shortly. So you can actually, in your own time, have a bit more of a look at what we do and what we help with small business owners. Awesome. So obviously today we are joined by Edwin, as I mentioned. Edwin is an admitted lawyer and he's our product manager for Lawpath. He oversees all of our legal documents. And now having said that, I will hand things over to him.
Thanks a lot, Connor. All right, so without any further ado, let's get started on talking about documents and how to use them. So I want to start here because I know many of you will be very keen to get your hands on documents so you can start using them to make agreements and comply with government requirements. But it's important to know that you have the right document and that you know how to use it. So what do I need to know to make a good document for our business? So our questionnaires, and this applies to all our documents. So we have like questionnaire on the left-hand side, which populates a document with information that is put into each answer field. And then we have the document on the right. So they function kind of like workflows in that they contain a list of steps that you want to go through. You want to make sure that you put the right information down. Generally, these are broken up into themes. So party details at the top, and then transaction details and specifications, legal terms, and finally signature requirements. Now, these may not chart a linear journey through the document on the right, so you might see it going up and down as it populates those answers. It's important to not try to force the kind of linearity of document. I mean, like going from top to bottom, because you may not be aware of how these questions necessarily connect to each other and what yes or no answers trigger what clauses. If you don't know how to answer a question, this is an indication that you're not ready to complete the document. And we provide information to help you answer questions, which is what I'm going to get into now. Having said that, we won't provide all the information you need at times. There will be a need for you to do a fact-finding mission to make sure that you're putting the right information down that reflects your commercial circumstances, as well as the other party that you may be dealing with. So in order to access information relevant to your document, as well as finding the right document, the information in the document summary is your first point of call. It highlights how documents must be signed and any post-execution steps required. So not every document can be signed in the same way. You have deeds, agreements, powers of attorney, and sometimes these require follow-up steps, which I'll get into a bit more detail later. It shows you where you can and can't edit documents. So for instance, with a lot of powers of attorney and statutory declarations, there's already a government prescribed format that you have to maintain in order to make sure that it's valid. If you change that format, if you step outside of the bounds we've set out for you, then it may not be valid. So it's important to be aware of that. The document summary will also highlight other useful documents that may be related to that particular transaction or area that you're dealing with, as well as circumstances where you might need legal advice to complete a document. So, and just to clarify, when I say document summary, I mean when you search for the document on the platform and you click on the name of the document, not on the plus sign on the right, it will take you to a page with a bunch of information about document. That's a document summary, and it's important that you pay attention to that. So yeah, this is what it looks like for the discretionary trust deed, for instance. We give you a bit of a warning, a general understanding of how a discretionary trust is set up, and then some information on particular areas that you might need to know, such as foreign surcharges. Now, the next place where you can find information about how to complete a document is in the tips and common answers. And by that, I mean these boxes that appear below the questions themselves. Now, the questions, the tips and common answers function in three general ways. The first one is to help you understand what the stakes are at each part of the document and therefore in each question. So you may not immediately create a link between supplier liability and whether the services are worth $100,000 or more. So this helps you understand what your answer is going to do to the document. Of course, you can also do trial and error. But if this is how you're going about answering a document, seeing what is triggered by each answer, then you should be very careful that you're actually looking at a document as a whole and that you're taking it very slowly to make sure that it reflects your actual needs. And so we also provide information to help you make sound commercial choices. So for instance, this question triggers an intellectual property clause. It's important for you to know what the difference is between the two types of intellectual property clause and how that may create consequences for the parties. Finally, we include best practice. So if you're filling in a shareholders agreement for the first time, then you may not be aware of how drag-along rights work. So we give you a bit of information about what common drag-along provisions look like. So I want to add that none of this should be taken as legal advice. Now, you may see this disclaimer in different parts of the website. I want to let you know that this disclaimer isn't just to protect us from, I don't know, someone taking things a little bit too seriously, and then not being happy with information provided. It's also to protect you, because the way law works is that you get legislation and then you get guidance provided alongside the legislation. You get courts interpreting that legislation, and you get lawyers looking at all of this and charting a general path through this maze for people. If all we see is our general customer base and their needs and the legislation, then we can give you general guidance and maybe a range of options for various circumstances. But if we haven't looked at your particular circumstances, then we can't say this is the form that you need to fill in, these are going to be the consequences, and this is amount of risk. And so to get proper legal advice, you will have to speak to one of our lawyers, either through the legal advice plan or through Marketplace. And that's where you should take it as legal advice. But everything else on the website should be considered guidance. That is, you should take into account alongside the circumstances that you're familiar with and other guidance you may find in government websites and so on. We can only take you so far if we haven't had a legal consultation with you. So now I want to provide you with a general set of guidelines for how to use and how not to use the document library and builder. So just some general tips for finding the right document. There is no difference between an agreement and a contract. They're two words for the same thing. So if you find a word agreement used in some context and contract used in others, then don't worry, you're in the same place. We'll sometimes change the names of our documents for SEO purposes. So if you're unsure, if you're dealing with the same document that you were 6 months ago, then you might want to just read the document description to get a sense for whether you're in the right place. So yeah, the document description and summaries will help you in identifying the right document. And as I said, we'll also link out to a range of similar documents that perhaps people might be confused by, or that they might need in addition to that document to complete a particular process. For instance, if you are submitting a meeting agenda, then you should also know that we have meeting minutes that can help you track what happens in the meeting itself. Finally, jurisdiction is very important. So we include in the metadata of the document, which is visible in the description, when documents can only be used in certain jurisdictions or when they can't be used in certain other ones. Sometimes we put this in the title. So for instance, only Victoria allows for wills to be e-signed. So while we provide a will that can be used for the rest of Australia, we recommend that that is printed out and manually signed. Only for Victoria should it be e-signed. And yeah, there are other areas where different states will have different requirements. So sometimes we get technical queries about documents going wrong. Just generally tends to happen if, as I said, you are chopping and changing the document on the right side before finishing the questionnaire on the left. And that is because there's a range of boxes on the right that will be filled in depending on how your questionnaire is filled in. And there's also a range of clauses that may be invisible if you're looking at them for the first time. So if you delete the space where this clause would go, then there's no way to get it back, no matter how you answer the questionnaire. So just be mindful of that, that you may have coherence issues unless you go through the questionnaire, first of all. But if you're stuck with a technical issue, even having filled in the questionnaire in order, then please reach out to us through Intercom, which is the chat on the bottom right of your screen when you are in the platform. So how do I ensure that my document is valid? This is probably the most important question in regards to a document, because you may have put so much effort into filling all the fields, but then you may not know how to sign it so that it will stand up in court or be recognized by regulators. The first step is to get your parties right. By parties, I mean the ones who will be bound by the terms of the agreement to each other. And it's important to get them right because parties are the ones who will be signing the agreement. So to give you an example of what I mean and how this can go wrong, consider a non-disclosure agreement mutual. Under that agreement, also known as a confidentiality agreement, you will generally have two corporate parties who will say that they have obligations to each other. Now, each of these parties will have representatives who will sign on their behalf, because a company has no physical presence but it's to sign. It always signs through a representative, as I'll explain in a moment. But these representatives individually are not the ones who bear responsibility. The companies bear corporate responsibility. Now, what does that mean? It means that if any of their representatives break the terms of the agreement, then the company will be liable to the other party. In regards to those representatives, the way you make them bound to these obligations requires a separate agreement, right? So you've got companies making obligations, promises to each other. And then within this company, knowing that all of its pieces have to follow those obligations, it will then make separate agreements with each of its employees. It may have confidentiality clauses in the contracts saying that they can't share information that is that arises out of particular planning meetings, for instance. And that's how the company will meet its obligation under that top agreement, by making sure that all of its employees meet their obligations, right? But the parties remain the companies. The employees cannot sue or be sued under that main contract. Some agreements are also one to many. These are also known as contracts of adhesion, and typically refer to terms and conditions, which is to say that when you are becoming a Lawpath customer, for instance, and you click on the sign up button, which leads to payment, then there will be you will be directed to our terms and conditions page, and those terms and conditions apply to every customer that makes a contract with us. So that's an example of where agreement terms are one to many, but the contract itself will still be signed between one party and one other party. And yeah, now I want to explain what exactly I mean by parties signing representatives. So how do companies sign documents? On the right, you will see an example of a question that we will ask in relation to a corporate party, so that the document produces the right signature block so that people can sign in a way that will be binding upon the company. Now, this question pertains to what we call Section 127 execution. which requires either two directors, a single director where the company only has a single director, or a director and a company secretary. Now, this is opposed to Section 126 signing, which I will explain in a moment. And Section 127 is often preferred because it is more formal and provides more evidence. It requires more people to have had their hands on the document. And so the corporate party can't then deny that they were the ones who signed the document. So when you see a question like this, it means that our document is drafted to be compliant to Section 127. In regards to Section 126, most documents will offer Section 126 signing because it is easier. Through 126, anyone can be authorized to be a representative for a company. And though there is more than one way for the company to appoint a representative, our director's resolution authorizing person to act as agent for company, so about the long document title, provides a clear and transparent method through a board resolution. So, like what the Corporation Act tries to ensure is that when you are sitting down in front of someone and that person is telling you that they have the authority to bind a company, that they actually do. So there's a couple of ways to determine this. In standard corporate practice, if the person can prove to you that they're the company secretary, then that will generally mean that they can bind a company. Then if they produce to you a resolution signed by directors saying that they're the company representative, that also means that they can bind a company. And there's also, under common law, if you've been dealing with that individual and the company's been telling you, yes, they're a representative, that also means that they can bind the company. And so, yeah, through those methods, parties are empowered to sign a Section 126 execution clause, which is quite simple. And yes, for companies in every instance, through either method, e-signature is okay. Now, how do partnerships and trusts sign documents? So each state partnership act allows partnerships to be bound by the signature of any one partner, as long as that agrees with the partnership agreement. If the partnership agreement says something different, that, for instance, financial decisions must be made by two or more partners, then you have to follow that. And partners may also by deed appoint agents to sign on behalf of the partnership, just like with companies. Now, in regards to trusts, trustees may make decisions for how to use trust money in accordance with the terms of the trust. So that means that they can sign contracts that will involve paying money out of trust funds, for instance, or running a business on behalf of the trust. And the same goes for attorneys under powers of attorney, by the way. So when companies are acting as trustees, when signing a document, that will generally appear as the full company name as trustee for the Johnson Family Trust, let's say, or when it's an individual trustee that's signing an agreement for the trust, it will be the name of the individual as trustee for the trust. But what about deeds? So all the information I've given so far refers to agreements. For companies, it's exactly the same as signing agreements, and these things used to be different, but they've been harmonized by the Corporations Act since COVID. However, individual deed signing is regulated at a state level, which is why it gets tricky. So we generally recommend that people print out deeds and sign them by hand, get them witnessed physically. However, if you seek convenience, in Queensland and Victoria, but nowhere else, individuals may validly sign deeds on their own behalf electronically and without witness. That's why we provide this warning whenever we're producing a deed that can be signed by an individual. It's also important to note that not all agreements or deeds allow for counterpart signing. So when signing deeds in different places, what's common is you'll have the different parties each separately printing a document in their separate location and then signing those. And then they'll either scan them to the other party, or at some point those two copies will be put together. This is known as counterpart signing. The law is a little bit ambiguous on what is required to authorize counterpart signing. Not all agreements and deeds will allow for counterpart signing. You may find clauses that say it's explicitly allowed. You may also find clauses that say that it's explicitly not allowed. What about wills, powers of attorney, and statutory declarations? So please follow the guidance provided in the respective documents and document descriptions. It's very important because there's a variety of ways to sign, and each state has separate requirements. With the exception of powers of attorney, which we will roll out as the states like there's a few powers of attorney that we don't have on our platform, and that's because states have not yet harmonized the requirements for powers of attorney so that they can be signed in a format separate to what they have on their website. So you'll still have to print them out for those stages. But yeah, with documents generally, where a document is not available for a certain jurisdiction, but it is available for others, it's because the legal requirements for completing documents may not be compatible with our platform. So yeah, we don't want people e-signing a document if that e-signature will not validly produce a validly executed document, for instance. So besides deeds, you will also need witnesses for contracts for the sale of land. Generally, sometimes witnessing will be requested even though it's not legally required. So some of our agreements will ask whether an agreement will be witnessed as a question in the questionnaire. This is a matter of what commercial practice you want to follow. It's a matter of the trust that exists between the parties. But yeah, when we ask a question like that, it will tell you whether it's legally required or not. How do our documents evolve over time? This is one of the most important promises that we make to our customers, that our documents will be up to date in a world of rapidly changing legislation, so that you can trust that our documents and our information is currently valid. And you can see when a document has last been updated. This appears in the metadata of the document description. And if a document has been updated since you last made changes to it, unfortunately, you'll have to generate your document again from scratch. So on the right, you see an example of how we tell our customers that your documents need updating, as happened last year with changes to family and domestic violence laws. We sent out this email, and tomorrow we are going to send out a newsletter that will have some updates regarding changes to employment law that are being implemented from the 26th of August, which I'll go into in a moment. So just so you know, we subscribe to a range of newsletters and are informed by various industry organizations. We regularly look through notice boards where legislative and regulatory changes are announced. Also, we have regular catch-ups between our lawyers, the documents team, and our CEO, where we communicate about how documents can be replaced, improved, or updated. We regularly add and remove documents. We haven't removed documents for a while, but we have added a range of documents, including the retail membership agreement, the rent to buy agreement, the unsuccessful probation letter, probation period extension letter, release letter agreement, and executive agreement. And I also want to let you know that we, as of last week, have started adding accounting documents, or rather more accounting specific as opposed to legal specific documents to our platform. This is not an area where I personally am qualified, so I can't answer questions about this, but we do have an in-house accounting team now that will be on hand to answer questions about these documents and optimize them to make sure that people have the right guidance. For now, the only documents available are trust distribution related documents. But we're going to make, in the next month or so, up to 10 more accounting documents available on our website. I want to talk briefly about Lawpath AI, which is no longer a new feature, but it's still one that is changing. So why is it that we have integrated Lawpath AI? Besides, the obvious hype that's been put around this new technology, it's because there are many legal questions that are important but easily answerable. So a lot of people will seek quick responses to questions. Sometimes you can't get a quick response because your circumstances may be complicated. But if you have an abstract question for which guidance is provided on a government website, AI will be helpful in letting you know what the answer to that question is. Now, lawyer-client communication suffers from a jargon problem, as you may have noticed with some of the words that I myself tend to use, and AI is good for simplifying these things and making legal accessible to people. It can also provide industry-specific insights. If you tell AI that you come from a certain industry, it can provide you with information more relevant to you. In its current form, AI is available to all users, including freemium. So we have simplify and translate. You're probably familiar with a bunch of these features, so I won't dwell too much on them. But yeah, simplify can summarize large bodies of text, define legal jargon in plain English, and explain the effect of legal provisions in a similar way to our tips and common answers do. And translate is available for the most common languages. Review can identify what issues a document addresses and where in a way that maybe more better honing in on the particular legal provisions than just Control F. And it can provide insights into the document, including potential issues. Review does not rely on external knowledge to provide insights, just so you know. It doesn't take your document and compare it to other documents. And this level of analysis should be carried out by lawyers. Now, Ask is our most popular feature to date. Ask answers your general legal questions and specializes in simple queries that are addressed on regulatory websites, as I mentioned earlier. For harder queries or queries that relate to particular facts, it will give only general answers. Draft. For draft, the best use case is to customize particular agreements for certain industries. We generally don't recommend asking Ask to draft complex agreements from scratch, just to add clauses relating to particular industries. It can also draft simple documents like draft letters, like letters and emails. And as with other AI tools, it's important to seek legal advice for a final review of the document, especially if you have further questions or are not confident with the document. It's also important to make sure that you're in the right place, so that you ask the AI to draft on the draft part of the menu, and you ask it to translate in the translate part of the menu in order to get optimal results. Now, we're constantly testing and refining AI. And also want to let you know that we're working on new use cases for AI. In particular, we're slowly building more specific review functions. So we've taken a lot of customer feedback on how people have used AI, what's working, what's not working. And so we've identified particular areas such as risk and compliance, where customers want more information on demand that AI can give them. So we're going to be slowly rolling these out in the near future. And I want to reiterate that AI works best when you complement it with existing services, like talking to a lawyer, like reading document descriptions and tips and common answers. So I want to add a couple of bits of guidance just to make sure that people know how to use documents based on recent queries that we've gotten. So firstly, how do legislative and award requirements relate to the employment agreement? So there is always a hierarchy in terms of the obligations that people have to follow in terms of what institutions are giving out these obligations, which we call the sources of law. So the highest source of law is the Constitution, but we won't get into that. Then we have legislation, both from state and federal sources. Then we have regulation, which tends to be used to buff up the legislation a lot of the time. Then we have award requirements. Now, awards are reviewed and provided by Fair Work every couple of years. And so awards are generally drafted to be compliant with the legislation, right? But the point of this hierarchy is basically to say that if you come across an obligation lower on the hierarchy that contradicts something higher up, then the higher up one will prevail. So this is particularly relevant to employment agreements. If your employment agreement contradicts something that exists in the award or legislation, then the legislation or award will prevail. You should regularly review your employment agreements to make sure that they're compliant. And even if it's not compliant, then your employee will have the right to act in accordance with legislation as opposed to the employment agreement. So there are very few cases where an employment agreement may override legislation and award requirements, and these are very risky to engineer. These are called set-off clauses. So for instance, you may provide someone with a particular entitlements or higher remuneration, so you then don't have to meet other entitlements as an employer, but these should only be drafted in consultation with a lawyer because these are very risky. How do I correct overpayments? So the law is very clear about this. If one party, an employer or otherwise, pays too much to the other party, whether in a particular installment or for all the services provided, then that party has the right to demand a refund for the difference. And the other party has to comply. Generally, a level of reasonableness is applied to this, and that relates to the time frame within which that refund must be given. And sometimes it's better to ask for it in installments. But yeah, whether it's your employer or at a restaurant, someone tells you that you've been overpaid, then yes, you need to be prepared to give that money back. Whether that was a mistake made in good faith, whether that was a mistake that's a result of some systemic issue, the obligation is the same, and it doesn't change the requirements under the agreement. How do I decide on governing law jurisdiction where it is asked in an agreement? So firstly, I want to say that you will often find a question framed in regards to governing law, and the answer that you give will populate the clauses relating to governing law and jurisdiction. And that's because generally both of them should work in sync. Now, how you know what governing law you should put down? Well, the primary resort is what state or territory the parties operate in, or if not parties, then the party that gets to call the shots in the agreement, the one that may be drafting this agreement. Because that will determine what laws are applicable to your agreement as a matter of legislation, and what laws you may be more familiar with. So you want to make sure that all of that is synchronized, because often laws in different states contradict each other. For instance, every state has quite different criminal laws and quite different laws relating to residential and commercial tenancies. How do I vary the terms of an agreement? You can vary the terms either, well, generally best practice is to create a deed of variation. A deed as opposed to an agreement ensures that the variation is effective. And so you outline the changes that you want to make to the agreement, and then both parties should sign as a deed to make the change effective. So I don't normally do this, but I want to add a bit of information here about upcoming legislative changes that will probably affect quite a few of you. These are the closing loopholes workplace amendments. Now, you may have seen notifications about these changes, and that's because the changes have been rolled out since the start of the year and will continue to be rolled out later. But there's a bunch of changes that are happening on August 26th that's important for you to know. So I won't go into these in detail as they will be covered in the newsletter tomorrow, but I just want to give you a general idea of what's happening. So firstly, there's the right to disconnect. In other words, the right of an employee to refuse to reply to a communication or a request by their employer that is made after hours without suffering repercussions for their refusal. We also have a right to disconnect policy, which can help you implement this. There's a new definition of employee, which creates a distinction between employee and independent contractor that is based on a series of factors about how the work is carried out in practice. Then there's a new procedure for casual conversion and a new definition of what a casual employee is, which puts the burden onto the employee to request casual conversion as opposed to the employer to offer it. Finally, there are new protections for gig economy workers and road transport workers. It's unclear what these protections are right now, but these sets of workers have been defined. There are expert panels that will decide on what protections will be rolled out in the future. So yeah, don't be afraid to ask us later on if you have any questions about these changes. Now I'll hand it back to Connor. Thank you.
Thanks, Edwin. So Edwin will take some questions shortly. So if you do have anything you want to ask us about the content of the webinar today, please feel free to drop those in the Q&A chat as well. And I'll shortly as well address and kind of give my 2 cents on some of the questions and answers in the poll we launched at the start of the webinar. So if there's anything I do say while I'm addressing that you have a query around, please feel free to drop that in the chat. If you did drop in a bit later as well to the webinar, we will produce this video on our YouTube page, so you can find it there. But if you do have any questions as well in the broader scheme of things on Lawpath and what we're about, I have shared some useful links in the webinar chat to our client testimonials, to our internal lawyers at Lawpath, and then just some pricing on different services that we offer to our clientele. But first of all, just a kind of, and I'll keep it pretty specific to what we've discussed on today's webinar. Like we could be here till 5 p.m. telling you every minor thing and big thing that we help with at Lawpath. But if you do have any existing contracts or policy documents, employment, company documents, service agreements, whatever it may be, whether you plan to create or update your current ones, I would recommend, especially around this time of year, getting those in for a review. And I'd recommend checking out our legal advice plan for that. It's actually the only subscription that's technically also a kind of bundle, as it includes the essentials as well as the latter two you see there do not include the documents. But your first point of call on that legal advice plan is actually booking in what we call a discovery call. And you can do that as soon as tomorrow. And the sole purpose of that call is for you to basically describe your business to us in as much detail as possible, discuss any kind of short-term concerns you have. And then really it's for the lawyer to ask some questions back, kind of poke and prod and expose some things you may not have considered. And I guarantee it, you will always learn something new. And starting and running your business is really hard. And when you become a business owner, there's not really a crash course in understanding the legalities of commercial law. There's a good reason why it takes lawyers, 6 to 7 years to study. But what we do at a nutshell is we obviously supply your business with over 500 legal documents, and you have unlimited edits and versions of these. But what you also get as an added benefit is unlimited on-call contract reviews of these documents in their legal advice plan. So if there is anything you're uncertain of, or you want to be really clever, yes, there are some AI tools to help you there, but gold standard would be to actually speak to a human, speak to a lawyer, ask about the clause you're looking at, but also ask about potentially additional clauses you want to add in there to protect your business. So in that instance, you would definitely want to book in a contract review. That being said, we do also have a live chat with the subscription. So if you are pressed for time or you're on the move, I know a lot of people in the construction industry, for example, are potentially moving site to site. So they'll use that chat to actually ask about the clause they're reviewing or unsure of, and kind of get an answer within the hour. And we do have very fast turnaround. So it is a same day or next working day consultations. So you'll always be able to get a consultation with us. So I know one of the most common complaints with lawyers in a traditional legal system is they're waiting 2 to 3 weeks before they can actually discuss their legal topic. But we're not limited just to discussing the contracts themselves. So I could list 100 topics and questions we're asked about, but some of the hot things we discuss include your business structuring, business purchase and sale, asking what contracts you need for your business, not just broadly, but also tailored documents for your business. Intellectual property and trademarking, debt recovery is a huge one. A lot of people are having to chase people for payment for their services. Um, Startup law and commercial property law, I'd say, is a big one as well. But on the accounting side, like a lot of our clients want to know, how they can actually save a dollar. A dollar saved is better than a dollar spent, as they say. And so some of the hot topics on that include tax minimization strategies, tax concessions they're eligible for, what they can claim as tax deductibles. And then again, business structuring or restructuring advice from the accountant's perspective. And obviously, we cover a lot of advice around specific types of tax, like your GST, PAYG, crypto tax now, interestingly, and capital gains. And finally, for the hands-on work, you actually have the tax compliance option there. So you have an initial consultation with our resident accountant, Tim, but he'll also be the point of call to do your previous or upcoming BAS lodgements, tax lodgements, all of your financial statements, and then you do as well get a special fiscal year consultation to do a deeper dive and analysis of your business spending and revenue. If there's of any interest to anyone, just email me there or do type in yes in the chat, or you can always reply to my initial email or text message I sent out to everyone today. If you do have questions now, please pop them in the Q&A. But in terms of the poll, so some people listening here around the business structure and they're considering, most people going for that PTY limited. Some of you may already be registered as a sole trader or about to. Would advise, it's one of the hot topics we discuss with clients from their day zero. Weigh up the pros and cons of different legal structures of your business before you go ahead with anything. Just because it can often be, money down the pan if you register something and actually maybe there was something else more cost effective or smarter to do when it comes to registering your business. Same with the trust as well. If you're already established as a company, you may want to think about a trust structure. To quote an accountant, if you're making over 100K, apparently the trust structure is an absolute no-brainer approach for your business, and it's something we can assist with here at Lawpath. Number two, following steps for your business. Most of you actually seem to have actually registered a company. You've got your domain names, designing a logo. If you have designed a logo or actually about to create one, would recommend also having a chat around protecting the intellectual property of your design. A lot of people are still looking to hire an accountant and a lawyer, so definitely have that as one of the tools in your business arsenal for best practice. And kind of off topic, like we have the tax compliance and accounting advice here. We had over 150 attendees to our taxation webinar last week, so we did have an offer there on the tax plan, which we're not officially offering on this this webinar episode, but if any of you do need support with your ongoing lodgements, but may already be behind on lodging your tax and BAS from last year, we do have a 30% discount with us, so we can actually get that sorted before the 15th of August. So it's coming up really, really fast now. So we are developing a business plan. That's also something pretty part and parcel with us. In the platform, we do actually have a business plan document, and what new customers will typically do is draft that themselves through the platform and then submit that for review with one of our lawyers. And I can see most people are also home-based, which is, I think, pretty typical now with most businesses. I would probably recommend in that case looking at our virtual office. And not everyone wants to share their home address, which people can look up and view if they want to research your business. So if you are operating from home, maybe you want to take that out to remove it. And then what essentially happens is people would see our address instead. Ideal if you're potentially going to bring on investors or there's a kind of an aspect of if people are looking into your business and thinking of doing business with you, if they see an actual professional commercial address, they're more likely to engage with you. But in terms of the hands-on stuff, we actually then receive all of your mail from ASIC, from ATO, from any clients. So it removes the clutter. And if there's anything you actually need to sign from them, the platform is actually built in with an e-sign feature, so you can actually sign it from your computers as well. Yep, most people assign a business name, tax considerations. Yeah, GST is always a huge one on people's mind. I was pretty naive and thought it was quite simple. And then I had an accountant who was on our webinar last week actually say that it's taken him 5 years to understand GST, so there's no real hope for me. If you do have specific considerations or concerns with GST, would recommend booking in a call with our accountant. And the same for tax deductions. That's a huge one. Like a lot of people miss out on things they can actually save on the deduction side. Um, and you can save hundreds, if not thousands of dollars just by having the right accountant to either give you advice before you purchase something or making sure you get that written off on your annual lodgements. Um, yeah, but also most people, yeah, want ongoing legal assistance. So please do feel free to reach out if you want to get that support from us. We'd love to work with you. Um, and yep, yeah, too easy. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask me in terms of the poll. If anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out on the Q&A chat there now. And something, because the slides have just gone down, we did have another slide on the bundle options as well. So if you've been with us some time, this will probably be news to you, but we've actually revamped the way we offer our services. So previously you had to kind of add the legal and accounting and tax compliance together. Now you can either go for standalone things, depending on what you think is appropriate for your business, or for a 40% discount, you can actually bundle options together. To make sure you're actually getting everything you need for the business from a compliance standpoint.